White. He's in. Patriots win the Super Bowl.
Welcome to Patriots Touchback Podcast.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome on to another edition here of the Patriots Touchback Podcast. It is me, your host, Carl. I am delighted to have Nick, JD, and Kieran alongside me tonight. Before we get cracking on with the show, make sure you smash the like button, you spike button, the subscribe button. Tell your friends, follow us on all our social media platforms, and follow us on the podcast on Spotify as well. We have got a lot to go through tonight. We've got to talk about the Matt Judon trade. We have to speak about the preseason loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, as well as a little bit of a breakdown with the Washington Commanders preview for this coming Sunday night. But for now, let's get on with the show. Panel, good to see you guys. Hope you are well. How's your week been?
Good, thank you.
Pretty standard, to be fair.
Let's see, Nick, you've got a special gig happening for yourself on Saturday, haven't you? You're off to Ireland. You're off to see the college classic in Dublin.
Yeah, Georgia Tech versus Florida State. So that's off with the boys from the college podcast that I do. So it's a long day. We're on a day trip. Oh, it's a long day. I wasn't paying 280 quid for a room at a hotel, so it was like first flight out, last flight back. Crack on, let's go. So.
No, that is just too expensive. When you told me behind backstage, that is just really absolutely ludicrous. But no, we have a good time on Saturday. It should be a good event, good times. Okay, gentlemen. Before we get cracking with the review of the Eagles' loss. We were wondering what the situation was going to happen with Matthew Judon, and early on in the week, it has now been confirmed. Matt Judon has been traded to the Atlanta Falcons for what is a third-round pick. Nick, we'll have your say on it first. What was your first initial reaction of Judon being traded, and did you think we got the right trade capital for him in the process of it all?
Yeah, I think I said in the group chat that I was disappointed that we couldn't get a deal together. I really felt he would have been beneficial, but on reflection, I think the third round pick is a good deal. I mean, the guy's 32. He's coming off an injury. You know, he's not. Yes, he's going to help in the mainstay at the time, but that doesn't help us in the long run in the rebuild that's going on at the franchise. So I think stepping back from personal beliefs, I think it's probably a good move. We got decent value for him. As I understand it, you know, the Patriots issued him their final offer. It wasn't anywhere near what he wanted, and so they made the decision to part ways. They asked him where he wanted to go. They had a group of teams that apparently were interested, all willing to give a third-round pick, and they asked Judon where he wanted to go. He told them, and they did the trade with that team. So I think on reflection, they did a decent thing. They helped Judon out and let him pick where he wanted to go. They got some value for him. You know, he doesn't blame. He came out and said this week that, contrary to what had been reported, he didn't blame anybody in the front office. He understood that, you know, this is the business of the game, and, you know, he holds no animosity to the Patriots. So I think, yeah, disappointing, but I think overall it's probably a good deal to get done at the time.
JD, what about you?
Yeah, I think Nick kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think it's probably the right deal for us right now. I don't think potentially when we're going to be looking, I think we've all kind of discussed that this season's perhaps a bit of a rebuild season, and we're probably looking to next year and the year after, most likely to when the Patriots are going to be kind of key contenders again. And I don't know if signing a 32-year-old pass rusher coming off a big injury, is really something we want to do in the position we're in right now. I think he would probably help us get better and win more games this season. But there's potentially, with our big hole at left tackle that I'm sure we'll talk about, and LSU's Will Campbell coming out next year, an argument as whether we want to be winning too many games this year. So actually, potentially, in a team that's going to want to reload in the next draft or two, getting another sort of top 3 round pick, I think is probably a more valuable than what Matt Judon would bring to us in the next year or two, I would think.
Kieran?
Yeah, I think it's something that suited both parties, to be honest. I mean, once it became clear that a deal probably wasn't going to be struck here, it was the right thing to do both for the team and for the player. I think a lot of the time, like having worked in a professional sports environment myself, like you do have to consider the human aspect of it as well. Like if you want to keep a player here when they don't want to be here anymore, I'm not saying that he has said that, but to a certain extent, if he's not going to get the contract he wants, he's going to be thinking about options elsewhere, then you've got to do the right thing by the player as well as the business. So I think that was what's happened, and I really like the return. I think a 3rd round pick for a 32-year-old coming off an injury is a fantastic return. You should really be getting a starting player in the 3rd round, really. So, yeah, I was quite content with it. Obviously, sad to see him go because he was a great player and he was a bit of a cult hero and the fans loved him, but you can't complain with what we've got back for him.
There's a lot of fans I've seen online that have absolutely gone whinge like hell about it, but he is coming off an injury, but it's not really something that's going to hurt him. It's a bicep injury. It's not like it's not like he's torn his ACL or tore ankle ligaments or anything like that. He's still able to make his cuts to try and get to the quarterback. So I think he still has that thing in him. For me, the 3rd round pick, I think, is justified. I think we're not going to get a lot more for him, let's be real, but that's actually a good one to have. What I will say is, though, it on the Falcons side of things, it just thinks. And Nick, you and me were doing the draft live back in April, and when we saw Penix taken by the Falcons at 8, we're looking at ourselves thinking, why have they gone and done that when they know they need a pass rusher? Because we said, I can't remember who the guy's name is now. It will come back to my
Turner.
Thank you very much, whoever said that. Cheers, Kez. Dallas Turner. He was sitting there at 8, ready to be taken. And we're like, you took Penix. So what makes it even more bizarre is that they've taken Penix. He's barely played in the preseason. And now they've traded a 3rd round pick to us to take Matt Judon, which now makes the 8th overall pick, what the Falcons just had, even more bizarre. And the only thing I can take it from that is it's an insurance policy because they don't know if Kirk Cousins is going to be good to go after a torn Achilles. Side note, we'll find out if Aaron Rodgers will. But at the same time, I like from both sides of things. The Falcons, they are contending for the NFC South. They're happy with their pass rusher. We get a 3rd round pick. Now we build capital into the new draft. Maybe only one pick into the 3rd round, but hey, we may take the 2 first and trade into the 2nd or something to get something a little bit more, a little bit more better. I don't know, like a proper right tackle. It depends.
I think from Atlanta's perspective, their hand might have been forced a little bit. Braylon Trice, who was their 3rd round pick out of Washington, I think he tore his ACL in training camp. And it's not a coincidence that 3 days later they're trading for Matt Judon. So, yeah, we know, as you said, Carl, they needed a pass rusher in the draft. They thought they'd address that with Braylon Trice and Brandon Dorlus. And then one of them goes down injured. So they probably thought they have to do something. They're clearly trying to win now with the way that they're constructing that roster. Justin Simmons has just signed there as well. I mean, having him at Jesse Bates at safety is a cheat code.
It's a scary tandem.
Yeah, it really is. When you've got AJ Terrell at corner as well. I mean, I wouldn't want to be throwing on them this year. But yeah, that's probably why they pulled the trigger for Judon so quickly when Braylon Trice went down.
But I think it makes sense for both sides, like Carl said. We're probably wanting to offload our higher end assets so that we have more draft capital and the ability to rebuild. Atlanta are in a pretty weak NFC South that they probably don't need Judon to win, but he's going to help them later in the season and come playoff time. And there's no rush for him to get on the field, I wouldn't think, for Atlanta, because they know that they're likely in a weak division going to be playing late in the year meaningful games. So you can bring him along steadily. So I think it's a good deal for both sides, where I think both nobody really wins the trade. I think both teams have probably done pretty well out of it and got what they wanted.
Yeah, I think so too. And to all the Cody all the Cody crybabies out there that are whinging that why we ended up trading Judon, just button it. Just button it. We know what we're doing. And there is a saying, what do we always do in New England? We sell a player a year early than a year too late. And I don't think we're selling Judon a year early. I actually think we're selling him at the right time. He's 32. You'll probably get one good year of production out of him, and then you'll probably fall off a cliff.
And I think that's probably where the disparity came between him and the Patriots, I would imagine, that they didn't necessarily want to lock up a 32-year-old coming off a big injury. I mean, we had the cap room for it, so financially it was probably there to be made, but I think it was probably more of the thinking down the line that, you know, if the next free agent class is looking pretty good and we're wanting to potentially be, you know, we're going to be quite high in the draft, we would imagine, if things play out as we kind of predict, we should be looking at a pretty revamped roster next year. So I would imagine that you'd want that cap space to be free.
No, absolutely.
I know that he's not on tonight. You have to give the guy credit. I know Joe's not on tonight. He's lavishing it out at Taylor Swift, but give the guy credit. He was the one in our chat. He made me howl with laughter when he said that, you know, Atlanta could give us the 28th/3 pick. You know, if Atlanta happened to lose the conference championship game, it would be, depending on their record, they could end up giving us 23-3. When Joe said that, I love that. Fair play to him for bringing that up. He deserves the credit for that.
Just a heads up, guys. We've just had some breaking news come through in the last 10 minutes. The Patriots have just signed linebacker Kobe Jones and linebacker Christian McCarroll. First-year linebacker was Kobe Jones, rookie free agent Christian McCarroll. Jones has spent time with the Falcons, Dolphins, Titans, Packers, and the Panthers. He originally joined Atlanta as a rookie free agent at Mississippi State in 2021. 6'3", 255. Most recently played in 6 games for the Hamilton Tiger Cats of the Canadian Football League. He was on Atlanta's practice squad, same with Miami's, and he went to training camp with Tennessee, but was released. So bit of someone who has fluttered in between teams, not quite made the cut. McCarroll, 25, played college football at Grand Valley State. He's 6'2", 253 pounds, played in 47 games during his career and finished with 151 total tackles, 15 sacks, 3 fumble recoveries, and 2 forced fumbles. Last season, he was a consensus All-American and the Conference Defensive Lineman of the Year after finishing with 67 total tackles and 8 sacks. So it seems like McCarroll seems like a very good pick, but this Kobe Jones looks like he's been fluctuating between different. But I suppose that's probably one or if not both replacement for Matt Judon, because technically Matt Judon is classed down as a linebacker, not a defensive end. He's not an edge. He's a linebacker, but he lines up outside.
The cut down day, as Johnny said in the green room, is literally next week. They are having a look at these guys purely for practice squad purposes, I would imagine. I don't imagine either of these guys are going to be on the 53. But it's to look at them, to fill those remaining 2 roster spaces, as he said, to have a look at them for a week, and then they'll probably get cut, and maybe one of them ends up on the practice squad. But I can't imagine they're going to hang around for too long.
Nah, I don't think so either.
No, they're long shots that will come in, be a camp body, and like you say, Kieran, probably be practice squad fodder or something. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Let's talk. Let's get into the preseason week 2 matchup, which was the Patriots taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. It didn't go the way we wanted. It ended 14-13 to the Eagles. But what we wanted to see out of this one, and we were begging to see out of this one, was to see not just 6 snaps of Drake Maye, but like at least a quarter to see what he was capable of. And a lot more of an impressive showing for Drake Maye than actually a lot of people realise. Although his stats don't pop off the screen as they should do. So he finished 6 of 11 for 47 passing yards, 15 rushing yards, but he also had a 4-yard touchdown keeper. So it looks promising. And from what we saw him play for, it didn't look at all that bad. JD, can you give us a little bit more of a deep dive into some of his plays? Obviously, we'll have a breakdown of the 55-yard bomb he tried to throw to Javon Baker, but unfortunately, someone decided it was a good idea to open up their hands instead of closing them. But I digress. But
there was definitely a hole in Javon Baker's bucket in that one, which was a little bit disappointing. And I think actually watching the Drake Maye film for this and kind of try to analyze what he was doing, I think Javon Baker was a bit of a disappointment for me in that game. A couple of things just that he was doing, bad habits and silly little things. And I think I was impressed with what Drake Maye did because one of the key concerns I had with Drake Maye coming out was his age and the fact he didn't have a plethora of experience at the collegiate level, and especially in the kind of system we're going to play where it relies on him going through his progression and his reads, especially off play action. I was really impressed to see the way he read the field. There's probably only one occasion, which was a deep ball down the left sideline to Tyquan Thornton, which looked like he'd basically gone pre-snap. Like, it looks like Tyquan's one-on-one. I don't care what the defense do. I'm going to throw this ball. And he was kind of prescripted with it. He had Wilcox open in the middle of the field and a deep dig coming from the right. But Tyquan just got shoved out of bounds, and even if he would have caught, it would have been flagged for illegal touching. But I don't think the decision was great, but the throw was still pretty good. And I think, Carl, you sort of discussed there the absolute bomb that he threw to Javon Baker, which to me, I think as a Patriots fan who had to watch the ghost of Cam Newton and Matt Jones try and throw the ball, I think one of the interesting things when you watch someone like Matt Jones throw the ball, it looks like he has to put his entire soul into the ball to throw the ball 50 to 55 yards. I think the thing that impressed me watching that highlight, especially the first time, was you just saw Drake Maye kind of plant his feet, just daintily flick his wrist. And then I found myself going, oh shit, this ball's still going. It's still going. It's still going. And it just flew. And I think it was really impressive, and especially the accuracy as well, because I actually don't think Javon Baker needed to dive for that ball. I think he probably could have just trusted his own speed and just opened up and caught that in the bucket. I think that was a really, really nice throw in between two safeties, which Drake Maye does favour the middle of the field. So that's something we knew about him, and you could see that on display with that throw. I thought that was a throw. There were two plays. That one. And the throw he had to Wilcox, where Wilcox runs a flat route from the other side of the formation, from the right hand side across to the left, and Drake Maye runs play action, and the edge on Philadelphia's right just wins immediately and comes round the corner. Surprise, surprise! Our left tackle didn't block particularly well.
You mean this left tackle? You mean that's what you said?
As Kieran pointed out last week, he's a big man, and if we get media passes, I don't want the Wembley game. I don't want to be the one who has to tell him that he looks like a corner. But it was really impressive to see him spin off the play action, recognise while he's rolling to his left, recognise pressure's coming, sort of stop, jump, and just flick it around the defender. And I thought that was very. Like a lot of quarterbacks don't make that kind of play. I think a lot of quarterbacks are not capable of it, but a lot of quarterbacks probably don't have the cojones to kind of try that play, which I think was really impressive to see somebody who was unafraid to kind of just rip a ball downfield. I think one of the things that was quite concerning in week one and some of the training camp reports was that he was quite hesitant and he looked very kind of skittish. I thought what you saw in this game was a player who, one of the most impressive plays for me was, there were two that really impressed me with his reading, were the dig that he hit Baker on, who jumps for that dig, which really frustrates me. I hate it when receivers jump when they don't have to, just keep going, which could be a problem for Baker. But
was that a 3rd and 5 by any chance?
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. You have I can't remember who it was on the inside. Was it Douglas runs a stick route and then Baker runs a dig over the top of him, and you have a high-low concept on either side, and he looks to the right, sees that the safety's shaded over the top of the corner route, which he knows that's likely not on, and comes back to his left and just reads the slot and sees that the defender in the slot has just moved across. And what's really nice is he throws that ball before Baker's open, which is something that's really hard to do, to throw with anticipation, especially at his age and experience level. It's really, you have, guys who've been in the league a long time. Russell Wilson, he got sacked like 5 times in the first 8 plays because the man has to see a receiver in 15 yards of space before he's willing to pull the trigger. And to see Drake Maye go to his right, realize that's not on, come back to his left in enough time and throw with anticipation, I thought was really, really impressive.
It's also with the quarterback, you're not trying to throw it to the receiver, you're trying to throw it in the window of where the receiver can actually catch the ball. Because if you actually try and throw it to the receiver, there's a good chance that defender's going to bat it down, or even worse, get the interception onto it. So it's always good to try and get it away from the receiver so they can move into their cuts and into their separations.
Exactly, and I think you saw that on the 55-yarder you mentioned earlier, that deep post route that Baker ran, and you saw him, like, I think when you see Baker kind of lay out for it, I think that's a wonderful throw because he knows that 2 safeties are coming across that field, and I think there was a completion later in the game as well to Javon Baker when he got done for illegal touching. He got flagged. Because he was shoved out of bounds and then fought his way back in and had a bad release on a go route. But if you ignore that, the ball that Maye threw was again led him down the field and away from the DB who was trailing him, which I thought was again really impressive because that kind of deep ball, and we knew that coming in that his deep ball, his touch and accuracy on the deep ball is impressive. But I thought that was really fantastic. And just another one quickly to kind of wrap it up. I thought the flat route that he threw to Jalen Polk, who then just absolutely skirts 2 of the defenders, I thought was a thing of beauty. It was fantastic to watch Jalen Polk just make 2 defenders, mission failed, we'll get them next time. That was absolutely fantastic. But what you saw was in a 3-step drop, Drake Maye went through 3 different progressions immediately. He looked at 3 separate routes in a 3-step drop, which at that level, that was something we expected to be a weakness for him. Jayden Daniels was the one who was kind of touted as the really experienced, fantastic processor, which we have seen, to be fair, in the preseason with Jayden Daniels. But I thought the way that Drake Maye processed that and immediately saw Jalen Polk in space and just went, okay, there you go, and took the win. I think that was really, really impressive. And then cool to see him cap it off with a keeper as well, where I thought he showed really good vision and athleticism to kind of pull the ball. And I really like, this is a sneaky little trait where he set, there was a really good block on the outside from, I can't remember who the receiver was. It might have been Baker actually. And he kind of started his run to the outside of Baker to help Baker get the leverage. Because when he started the run to the outside of Baker's block, you saw the defender kind of jump to the outside, and that helped Baker shove him towards the sideline, so Maye could then cut back in field around the back of Baker and get straight ahead into the end zone and made a lane for himself, which again, that kind of vision and processing was really, really good to see, because one of my concerns, I think everybody's concern, was his inexperience and processing ability. There were no doubts about his physical traits, and I think he answered some of that. It was nice to see that obviously there aren't concerns, and I think that was the difference perhaps you saw with Jacoby Brissett, where you saw somebody who is a good to average NFL quarterback, and then you saw somebody walk onto the field. It's like, okay, this kid's got it. This guy has genuine elite top shelf talent, and I think that was apparent in the. I don't think he'll start week 1, but I think he's made enough statement for us to go, okay, everybody who was freaking out for Joe Milton in week 1, sit down for a little bit. Let's leave that alone, and I think it made me very confident we're going to be in safe hands in the future.
No, absolutely. The way Drake played throughout the second and the third quarter, I thought he did really, really well going through his reads. I'm still stressed about that 55-yard bomb, because what he did, he took 3 step drops. He then stepped into the pocket. He then moved left in the pocket, and he still had the time to just go, okay, and he just launched it with just absolutely. It wasn't like he actually took all of his strength to do it. It was just a quick, and it just goes through no problem. But
just a dainty wrist play.
Sorry, guys. I think a lot of that about, obviously, he's moving and he still has this moment of time. I genuinely think that's a benefit of the red jersey that they practice in, because obviously, as most quarterbacks do, they practice in the red jerseys or whatever color jerseys they want to practice in. The Bears have orange and whatever, and they're not to be touched. And the team knows they're not to be touched. So when he steps back and he's in practice in that red jersey, he's got all the time in the world to survey and have a look what he wants to do, and then he makes his read and does it. Whereas, especially in the Eagles game, he didn't have that. He had those defenders coming after him, and so he had to move that little bit quicker. And I think by moving that little bit quicker and not having the time to take his time and knowing he's not going to get hit, by knowing he might get hit, he had that little bit of speed to just get ahead of his read and find himself with an extra second or two to just sort himself out. And I think that's probably a benefit of practicing in his red jersey and then coming into a game, and it allowed him to show the physical traits that on the tape before the draft was all, like how he's quick and he's hitting the ball downfield and using his mobility to get around. They were all traits that came out on his draft tape that everyone was raving about, and he was able to show those in game, which I quite liked. There was a moment when I think there was 2 passes in a row that I didn't like, just because, and I've said this before and I'm not going to go on about it, he didn't plant his left foot. He could have got so much more distance and power, but he seems to be throwing with his body rather than from his legs upwards. He didn't plant his left foot on 2 occasions, and I just thought if you'd planted your foot then, you could have thrown that another 10 yards, 15 yards further down the field. And it just seems that, that was the downside to his draft, his footwork, and I think it has improved, but it needs to get better.
Yeah, I think it does, but he's done really well so far.
Yeah, definitely. I think I got a bit on my bit of my own hype there, and I think it was I was very encouraged, but I was very positive as well. I think, like Nick said, there were a couple of things in there that perhaps weren't wonderful. One of the concerns I had were the amount of time he was in shotgun. Alex Van Pelt's system, from what we're expecting it to look like, he hasn't technically called plays, but his time in Cleveland and Buffalo and stuff, we would anticipate he should be under center quite a lot. He was not. And one of the snaps, I think he was only under center for 2 snaps. One of the ones that he was under center, he did fumble a snap. So that could be a concern going forward. So that's probably worth thinking about, I think, that is a concern. And also, sort of a negative and a positive in one, because he threw an awful flat pass to Kayshon Boutte, who made an incredible one-handed catch on that flat route, which I think the short area accuracy that Nick kind of spoke about with the footwork stuff, I think that came out there when he didn't plant his feet properly and he just tried to saw an open man. I think that was a quick read. It was he actually correctly identified man, it looked like, and saw there was single high safety, likely man coverage, saw that Boutte had his man was well off. He just basically read the outside corner. If the outside corner went with Baker, just boom, go and hit Boutte. And I think he just didn't set his feet properly and absolutely sailed it, which on his short stuff is a concern. So that wasn't great to see, but it was great to see Boutte pull that out of the air with one hand. So that was quite nice.
The most spectacular 2 yards you'll ever get.
Oh, if
that gets you on the roster, no one's really caring. What was great with Drake Maye was now to go to the bad side of it. Unfortunately, Jacoby Brissett, let's just say, had a bit of a rough quarter, shall we say. One aspect of Tuesday's struggles that fell on the quarterback was spotty downfield accuracy for me. Brissett simply missed throws when the opportunities presented themselves. And on Thursday night, it was more of the same. Brissett finishing 3 of 7 for 17 yards and an interception.
I don't blame him for that interception, Watching it over and over, I really think the receivers should have probably got his body in a better position. I know that, the opposition man got in front of him and actually broke the play up. Fair enough, got the interception. But I really would expect more from the receiver there. I don't put that whole interception on Brissett. I think there's some 60-40 there.
Yeah, so it was intended for Wilcox, I believe it was, number 87, Johnny.
Yeah, it was. I think for me, I disagree a little bit. I think with that, I think he was just late. I think he was late, and the stick route was to the outside, and he threw it to the inside. So I think that's probably where the interception comes from. If he puts that ball, I think a couple of feet further to the left, I think the receiver's probably got a chance to either at least break it up.
Who's at the top of that route on the right hand side? Was that Thornton by any chance?
I can't remember.
Because I'm rewinding this tape now, and as he steps back here, the corner on the right hand side has slipped and has lost his man. If that was Tyquan Thornton, I would. Has he got time to?
I think, to be fair, with that, it's probably a progression thing where he made the right read. He's just late to it. And if he just throws it on time and to the outside, I think he's probably fine.
Yeah, I believe that was Thornton on that side. If I can just look at the detailing, which it was to Austin Hooper, but it was intended to Hooper. It was so. Yeah, it's hard to see. It's hard to see who that receiver was at the top there. I have got a suspicious feeling that was Tyquan Thornton, because the corner slipped. The corner slipped and lost his footing, and Thornton was actually was. I think he had about half a yard of space open, and I think if Brissett, as you say, gets that ball out on time, he probably nails him in the corner for a touchdown.
Yeah, I think likely so. I just think it's probably a matter of progression, because I don't think Brissett really looks that direction. So I think he probably makes the read and realizes that Wilcox is on, and it's the right read. Because typically, in the way your progressions work as a quarterback, you would go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and he's probably hit 1 or 2, seen a man who's going to be open, and just made a bad throw, and just not poor timing and poor accuracy, ball placement. But I think it's probably maybe a sign of things to come, because I know the practice reports coming out in the past couple of days since the Philadelphia game have been that Brissett has looked more skittish and less confident, and Drake Maye's confidence has just kind of grown exponentially, and he seems to have been kind of found his footing decision-making wise, which, to be fair, is to be expected as he gets used to the system. Obviously, Brissett has already got that experience with being at Cleveland last year, so I guess we have to wait and see.
Just off the back of that, with Drake Maye, just a couple of things that I picked up on. Obviously, we've all heard Jerod Mayo's comments the other day, who has now gone from at the start of training camp to saying Jacoby is the starter to we don't know who's going to start. Obviously, Drake Maye is giving him a headache. And then I was watching GMFB earlier where Kyle Brandt was talking about Drake Maye and said it obviously, like, the situation is what it is. Like, there's the argument, do you want him to sit? What's the best thing for the team? Obviously, we're not going to be contending for the playoffs. But he just kind of summarized by saying, if Drake Maye is just clearly so much better for the team than Jacoby Brissett, just play him. Just play him. Like, Jacoby Brissett is a 30-year-old journeyman who is a good teammate, who's a good backup, who's a solid, stopgap player. But you know what he is. He's been in the league for 8 years. You know what you're going to get from him. And he's going to have some good games. He's going to have some bad games. But if there is clearly a gulf between the two of them, on a losing team like we're expecting to be, why not just play Drake Maye? And I thought it was a really interesting debate because no one's looked at it from that perspective so far. It's always been like, do we need to protect Drake as much as possible? But if he is so much better than Jacoby, then does it hurt, I guess?
I think that also poses a kind of team morale and motivation issue of if you are saying to your team, there's a guy in training camp that everybody can see, or in practice every day, that we can see is definitely better and gives us a better chance to win. If you're playing on defense or playing another position, why the hell am I going out and putting my body on the line and busting my balls every play for our coach to make the decision to sit our quarterback and not give us the best chance to win? So I think that's a really good point, Kieran. That actually, if you start to think of it in that sense, if it is a case of you're watching on the practice field and it's undeniable Drake Maye is better than Jacoby Brissett, you have to, because otherwise you start to get concerned about the locker room and things like that.
There was
Sorry, go on, Carl.
There was a consensus going around, though, that if Drake Maye is going to eventually start, not bang on start week 1, but eventually start, there was an argument going around of what would be the earliest time. Look at our first 4 games. On the road to Cincinnati, tough game. Home to Seattle, tough game. On the road to the Jets, it's still the Jets, but that will still be a tough game. And then in week 4, on the road to San Francisco. Yeah, we're not winning that game. We're going to get absolutely bludgeoned. There's a good chance at best we could go 2-2 or 0-4 at best. Sorry, 2-2 at best or 0-4 at worst. Do we really want Drake Maye playing in those first 4 games and having his confidence getting absolutely destroyed?
I think it's
playing against the Cincinnati's offense, which is going to be a problem to deal with, the Jets defense, which we know is amazing, and the 49ers defense, we know is just elite.
Yeah, I think.
Are we risking him damaging very, very early? Because, like I say, if you want to start him as early as possible, week 5 at home against the Dolphins, that's the earliest you start him. No later do you start him past week 10. No later do you start him past week 10. If it goes past week 10 and we still got Jacoby Brissett in the centre, you might as well ice Drake Maye, because I think we knew then what the final end game of this season will end up being.
I think the only way you'd see Brissett still playing at that point is if he's just absolutely balling out. And I think if he is playing well, I think, to be honest with you, the way our offensive line has potentially gone, I know it was better at the weekend, but Philadelphia didn't play any of their starters, so that's difficult to take much from. But I think it's probably likely we want to keep Brissett in for at least the first sort of 4, 5, 6 weeks. But I think it might just be a case of, let's see how long it takes whoever's starting to get injured, because the offensive line's not good enough. I think that's potentially where you see something happen. Brissett has been quite injury prone throughout his career. And I think you're probably looking, if 4 or 5, 6 weeks of him taking a beating each week, especially against that kind of murderer's row, I think it might be a case that he might be dinged up for a game or 2 and then just kind of get Wally pipped, and he loses his spot to a minor injury and doesn't get it back.
On the argument for sitting, like, obviously, Carl made a good point. Do you want to protect your investment? Do you want to put him in at the right time in order to shatter his confidence? But there's 2 ways to look at this. The first one is, if you look at those quarterbacks that have sat and had success, much different situations. Aaron Rodgers was behind Brett Favre. Tom Brady obviously came in behind Drew Bledsoe, who was established at the time. And then we all, we weren't expecting what happened to Brady, and he went on to be the best of all time. But even Patrick Mahomes sat for his rookie year, but they were a playoff team. They still made it to the playoffs under Alex Smith. And they were saying on GMFB earlier that maybe if they had played Patrick Mahomes, they might have gone the whole way. Maybe that decision to sit him behind Alex Smith might have cost them another Super Bowl, which I thought was interesting. But another thing to look at it from a confidence aspect is, if Jacoby Brissett does play the first 4 games and he's terrible, and we score a combined 20 points across 4 games, that's going to destroy the confidence in the roster. Like, they're not going to have confidence in him. The roster's going to be downbeat. If we're sat 0-4 and Jacoby Brissett's thrown 1 touchdown and 7 picks across 4 games, then they're going to be disillusioned as it is. So is it just better for the roster to give them an uplift to just play the best guy? And I've got no issues. If they feel like Jacoby is the best guy for week 1, fine. But if Drake Maye is ahead, I think you just play him at this stage.
And I think that's definitely the way Mayo's kind of narrative has gone. Like, you and Carl talked about earlier, that it's very quickly gone from no, Jacoby's the guy to, well, maybe, we'll see. And I think that's kind of potentially going to continue. Like, I think ultimately, and I'm sure Bob Kraft sat in his luxury suite thinking, I want to sell tickets and I want to sell Drake Maye jerseys. Let's get him in there as soon as we possibly can. And I mean, selfishly, I would definitely like him to be inserted into the starting lineup before the London game. Very much so, because I'd like to see Drake Maye rather than Jacoby Brissett, but that's just a bit of personal bias.
Yeah, it is personal bias for you. Okay, let's move. You transitioned well into for the offensive line, so we're going to transition into there. During the training camp practices, joint practice with the Eagles, the offensive line was, well, I keep bringing up this Colander pick. Well, it was worse than that during the pick. It was shot. Yeah, Nick said it correctly. However, in this game, obviously, okay, we didn't see any of the Eagles' main pass rushes out there, so it's very hard to gauge on how good our offensive line was. But the offensive line for actually in this game only gave up 3 sacks. One of them was obviously what you spoke about already, which was in the third quarter where Vidarian Lowe missed his assignment and Drake Maye got absolutely decked. And then the other 2 sacks was literally in garbage time in the fourth quarter, where Joe Milton's offensive line was basically a load of Papa John's pizza boxes because they couldn't protect him to save his life. He got two really bad sacks on that, and he only played 9 snaps, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So the starting line when Brissett was on the centre, Vidarian Lowe at left tackle, Sidney Sow at left guard, David Andrews at centre, right guard Michael Onwenu, and then Chuks Okafor at right tackle. So when May started, nearly the entire starting line was in there, but not David Andrews. Nick Leverett came in as the backup centre. The Pats have been managing Andrews' workload this summer while he also hasn't snapped to May in practice. That's a bit of a concern for me because your starting centre needs to have that repertoire with the quarterback, especially a rookie quarterback. So that makes it a little bit slightly worrying for me. After the first drive with May at QB, the Patriots replaced their starters on the right side. So Layden Robinson at right guard, Caden Wallace at right tackle. The 2 rookies are developing well, working with the second unit, which has primarily blocked for May in practice. New England's best outside zone run, the primary scheme in Van Pelt's offense, came with a mixed line of 1s and 2s, which was Lowe, So, Leverett, Robinson, and Wallace. Lowe and So worked the backside combination to block well, and So working to the second level to create the cutback lane. The decision to roll with Lowe is as star left tackle is still a bit dubious because we've seen him play left tackle in the actual proper NFL regular season games in the back end of last season, and we just get, we shit bricks every time he's at left tackle. So that, he has some shaky reps and he gets beat quickly due to his stiffness and slow feet. On Thursday night, he overset outside with the running back chip in, allowing Nolan Smith inside for a sack. Yep, that was the missed assignment that he did for Drake Maye in the third quarter. But Lowe uses his length well and plays with good power, which the coaches do seem to like. Are we actually being a bit harsh on Vidarian Lowe here, or
no? I'm sorry.
I think
genuinely this week when Elliot Wolf, don't get me wrong, I think Elliot Wolf has done a good job so far, and I'm hesitant to critique him because I actually think he's done a good job as this, whatever he is, director of player personnel. But for him to face the press and have the audacity to come out and say they're excited about the guys they have on the offensive line and the Vidarian Lowe has developed well and has been playing well, I'm all be transparent, but be honest at the same time. The fan base can see he's been a shower of shit. Don't bullshit the fan base. Everyone that has eyes can see this guy's bad. And he might have improved from last year, but that's just because he was even worse last year. It was just, I'm all for, coming out and defending players because, like I said, there is a human aspect of it. But when everyone can see it's blatantly obvious that this guy is terrible, Like, don't try and sugarcoat it. I think that was a real knock against Elliott Wall for me. And especially when he said they're not going to pursue any free agent tackles. We reeled off 4 names last week that could do a job. That would all be an instant upgrade. And
I think he likes him because he helps him achieve Elliott Wolf's overall goal of Will Campbell. You know, stick with Darian, be a turnstile. Let us get a high pick.
If Lowe gives up 35 sacks next year alone, and we get Will Campbell, then I'd take it as long as Drake Maye isn't hospitalised for the whole season.
Yes,
I would say I am not going to sit here and defend Lowe completely. The only thing I would say is he's being asked to play there. That's not his fault. He's trying, but he's being
That's
asked
his
to
job.
play there.
That's his job.
And he's doing his job to the best of his ability. Now, his ability is not good enough, but that's not his fault. That's the coach's fault for asking him to play there. Now, as I understand it, from what I read this week, the idea is that they want Wallace to play right tackle, but they're not happy with his arm and hand work at the moment. So Okafor is having to deputise at right tackle while Wallace is still improving his hand work. Once Wallace's hand work and arm work is good enough, Wallace will move into right tackle, which will mean Okafor can move over to left tackle. But until then, Lowe is going to continue to deputise for Okafor, who's currently deputising for Wallace. Now,
is Gromit in there as well?
I said we should have got Latham last year. We should have got Latham rather than a QB. But hey, what do I know?
Well, yeah, but we've also given multiple names that could come in and do a better job than we've. I know. So there's plenty of options that could have happened, and they've decided to stick with Valerian Lowe, and I just don't understand why. I mean, yes, okay, he may have improved in certain aspects in camp, and they spend a lot more time with him than what we do. But I still think it's quite obvious on the film that this guy is struggling and is a liability.
Yeah, so listen, look, in fairness to Lowe, he didn't put himself in the position where he's the Patriots' best option at left tackle. He's really the Patriots' only best left option at left tackle position, because that is on Wolf. That's on Wolf from the personnel department, unless they decide to make a major shake-up before the regular season opener. You've got to look at it as Valerian Lowe is going to be the starter in week 1.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Okorafor seemed to start camp at left tackle and then very quickly has not played there again. So I know Tristan Wirfs had a quote, didn't he? Was it last off-season where he talked about moving from right tackle to left tackle or vice versa is kind of like trying to write with your wrong hand. Like your whole life, you've gone one direction and then you're asking to do it the other, and it's very difficult. But seemingly, like Chuck Okorafor wasn't able to make that adjustment, and I think that's probably some of the concern that most of the guys like Calvin Anderson and stuff as well are not guys who naturally play left tackle, and Valerian Lowe is, and that might be why they're favourite. Now he plays at a pretty poor level, but he's a natural left tackle. I'm clutching at straws here, guys.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But the only other option you could be decent.
It's a good point. But if you compare it to football, like you could have a goalkeeper who is a goalkeeper, but he might have wrists that are limper than the granddad. You know what I mean? And he just can't keep anything out. And this is the thing. Like, he is a natural left tackle. He played left tackle in college, and as a positional fit, that is his position. But he just isn't good enough.
It'd be interesting, I think, to see what other options we have. I'd like to have seen more of Okorafor or Wallace get reps at left tackle, because to be fair to Wallace, he has had limited snaps at left tackle in the Philadelphia game, but he actually in PFF graded quite well in pass blocking. And he mixed between, I think, 2/3 of the time at right tackle and 1/3 at left tackle. But his pass blocking, his run blocking grade wasn't very good, but his pass blocking grade was pretty good. I think it was an 80 something, 82.4.
And considering Alex Van Pelt's offense is used to predominantly run the ball more than pass, you want it. That's the sort of the risk that you could end up taking. The only other option you got is for Chuck Okafor to move to the left side of left tackle, push Michael Nguyen back at right tackle, and then you force Wallace to play out of position as a rookie. You know, due to the continuity they've already built on the line. My guess is they'll roll with Lowe until it becomes a major issue, which will probably be after week 1. So, but you know, that's.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Carl, because all the guys who was in the starting 5, Okorafor, Andrews, Sidiso, Vidarian Lowe, Michael Onwenu, all 5 of those graded really well in run blocking. And I think the zone blocking scheme, because most of them are pretty athletic for their size, and I think that's probably one of the attractions to Vidarian Lowe is he's a huge mauler who can move well. And I think that's probably why they want him in there for that zone running scheme. Now, he pass blocks at a much lower standard, but hopefully you'd like to think if we can have a more dominant run game with Ramondre Stevenson and with Kevin Harris, who's looked brilliant in a zone scheme in the preseason, who actually looks like a better fit than Ramondre Stevenson at the minute for that zone scheme. I think that could help kind of ease Vidarian Lowe's load a little bit, and the utilization of play action, if our run game is effective, will hopefully slow down the pass rush, which I think is what they're hoping for. But that for me is the only way I can kind of see us saving the offensive line anyway, would be to rely on our dominance in the run game.
I know you mentioned as well about not playing a rookie out of position, and I completely get that. But like, you've got a 3rd round pick invested in Caden Wallace, like, get him the playing time, like even if it's out of position, because you've got nothing in Lowe. You acquired him on waivers last year from the Vikings. Like, you've got nothing tied up in him. He's probably on a low end contract. You know, he's probably like, you know, like not going to cost you anything to cut if you end up cutting him. So whereas in Caden Wallace, you're paying him a 3rd round contract, which is probably more than what Lowe's on, and you've invested a starting pick in him. So for me, I think I would just roll with the rookie and just see what he's got until, like Carl said, if that becomes a problem. But at the moment, Lowe is a problem.
Yeah, and he was a senior as well, was Wallace, when we drafted him. So he's 24 already. So he's not a 21, 22-year-old player. He is an older prospect as well. So you would expect him to be more pro ready.
Yeah, you expect him to. Let's move off the offensive line, shall we? Let's talk a little bit about the pass rush. So obviously Matt Judon got traded. Big void to fill. No problem at all with our defense because we had 5 different, 5 sacked on 5 different players. Although it was only preseason, 5 different Patriots sacked Philly 2nd and 3rd string quarterbacks, including sacking backup quarterback Kenny Pickett. Sorry, I was watching South Park the other day. The sacks were handed out to Joshua Uche, Dietrich Weiss Jr., Ocean Exemans, Isaiah Bolden, and 2nd-year defensive end, my boy Keon White. The monster that is Keon White. We say White for last because, you know, his year 2 leap might have played a role in the Pats past feeling comfortable trading a player of Judon's caliber. And I think that's what they're leaning on here. They're leaning on Keon White to really take it to the next level.
I think he's probably going to have to kind of replace some of the Barmore pass rush that we're going to. I think he probably wins better from the inside. And I think that's probably where he will have most success. So I think he might be a big factor in helping replace. He's a very different type of pass rusher to Judon, but I think that's probably where he wins best is inside.
Nick?
I mean, the Eagles game was the 2nd game in a row that the defense had 5 sacks. So you can't knock that. You know, Uche, Wise, Zimenez, Bolden, and White all got a sack. You know, White played at both edge and at linebacker against Philly. I think he moved inside later on, didn't he? He did play well. He attributed to the fact that he'd seen in practice the day before the reactions to how the Philly offense were moving, and he just noted that in his head, so that in game control situation, he was able to take advantage of that. The problem is you don't get to practice against the team you're about to play every week.
Yeah.
So that's one of those. But I think, Keon White has really sort of like he's impressed everybody. I think I don't know of anybody who's not impressed with him. He had that unfortunate injury early on, and there was the issue with the delayed camera shot of when he was getting drafted, when he looked like he had a face like thunder, and it's like, yeah, you've been drafted with the Patriots. Oh God, but he's done really well. Losing Barmore was big, but I agree with you, Carl. I think White has got the potential to really, go places this year.
And also, Anthony Jennings was pretty solid last year. He's a very good edge setter, and I think he'll probably play more of a role this year. But also, one name that you've both mentioned that's had a really good under the radar camp by all accounts is O'Shane Ximenez.
Yeah,
and I think he said in one of his interviews he done recently that the Giants scheme didn't necessarily suit his skill set. He was being asked to play a role that he'd never played before. It didn't really suit like what he does and what he's good at, and that he's come to New England and he's playing exactly the role he wants to play. And he's shown up all throughout training camp in the preseason games, and he's going to make the roster 100%, like the way he's going. Yeah. And I think he can be a contributor 100%. And, we may need him and Anthony Jennings.
Yeah,
I like the way Jimenez plays. I think he just plays with his hair on fire, which I think is like a very Patriots linebacker way. And like you say, I think a scheme fit is definitely what you see with him. I know he's not wonderful in coverage, but his pass rush ability and his tackling is good. He doesn't miss tackles very often, especially later the last two seasons he had with the Giants. I don't think he missed a single tackle. So, impressive stuff.
Judon's production will be a huge loss, but it is down to everyone else now to... Sorry, what's that, Nick?
No, I saw... Go on, carry on. I'm just looking at... what Kieran said about Lowe. His salary is less than $1 million. Basic salary against the cap. I was on over the cap. That's what I was getting distracted. 895,000 against the cap. That's his salary. He's got no bonuses. That's just what we're paying him per year.
Joey Sly's getting more money than him. Talking of Joey Sly, well, let's move into the kicker, shall we? Because the competition's actually been getting quite tasty between Joey Sly and Chad Ryland. Joey Sly has been nailing his field goals during the preseason. Obviously, Chad Ryland's only been kicking the PATs. It does look like, from where I'm sitting, Joey Sly has got the upper hand in the kicking contest so far, but I think we've got the Washington game coming up soon, so we'll find out by then. What's everyone's thoughts on the kickers? Is it going to be Joey Sly that takes it, or is Chad Ryland going to pull the magic horseshoe out of his backside and actually do something bad? Because the one thing we've noticed about Ryland is that he's incredibly inconsistent. But then again, so is Joey Sly. But Joey Sly looks to have been more consistent in training camp than what Ryland has been. Mm-hmm.
I think Curran nailed this the other day on his podcast, where he said with Chad Ryland that the team probably want him to win the job because they invested a 4th round pick in him last year, and that they'll want to see a success story from that, because otherwise it's going to be one of the biggest wastes of a pick that we've had in a long time. But equally, he also said that Chad Ryland seems to be pretty chill and good in camp. Where he makes a lot of the shorter kicks. Obviously, he doesn't have as big of a leg as Joey Sly does. Sly can boom it from a big distance. But it seems when the lights go on and there's people in the crowd and there's more pressure, that Ryland tends to crack a little bit more than Joey Sly. And obviously, Joey Sly's been in the league for a long time, and he's kind of I think someone summed it up a couple of weeks ago, said he's streaky. I think that's very true. He's streaky.
Optimum word,
got
yeah.
a massive leg and he's streaky. But if it were me, although we'd have the 4th round investment in him from last year, I think you just got to go with the best guy that you've got that's going to make him majority of your kicks. And if Ryland can't kick from distance and if he's going to freeze under pressure, then I'd rather have the guy with more experience. But like their stats are pretty similar in camp, aren't they? So I guess it's not going to matter drastically.
No, I mean, Chad Ryland did have like one of the worst field goal percentages in the NFL last year for like regular kickers. If you order it, I think he has literally the worst if you remove like, guys that just did the odd spot kick. Like Matthew Wright came in, I think, and kicked for a game in Carolina when their kicker was injured and he went 0 for 1 and things like that. But he kicked at 64% last year on field goals and, he was 50% at 40 yards and beyond, which when you're watching Dallas's kicker nail, a 66-yard kick that would have been good from 72 or 73 or whatever it was, Next Gen Stats said.
Who was a football player beforehand as well. How much do you feel if you've been a kicker throughout college and a former football player rocks up and is one of the best in the league? Like,
yeah,
we just sign Harry Kane.
Exactly, it is concerning because
let's not go down that road, shall we?
I just think somebody like Chad Ryland, you can find Chad Ryland's quality out on the streets. Like a 64% NFL kicker, a field goal percentage. Like you could bring anybody in and they could do that. So I think my concern is like, and honestly, the one kick we wanted him to miss last year in Denver, he made. And if he misses that, we have a higher pick. So even then, he can't even do us a favour. So
we did. Well, we did. He missed a field goal against the Giants, didn't he? 10-7, that debacle.
Yeah, he missed that one, and then he made one against bloody Denver, didn't he? In the thin air, easy kicks. It's a joke. I think Joey Sly's probably gonna. I would prefer Joey Sly to win that job. I just don't have any faith in Chad Ryland after last year.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. What other 1 point from each unit for the remaining game? What was your? It can be a positive or it could be a negative, whichever we say. Kieran, we'll start with you.
I think we started with a lot of intensity. I really like the tempo early on. And I know things change when you're rotating bodies and you go into your 3rd and 4th strings late on, then it can alter that a little bit. But I just thought the game just fell on its arse a little bit after a while and become incredibly boring again.
Always does in preseason.
Yeah, and that is a part of preseason. But I really liked how we started. We were aggressive. We went to them, and there were things happening early on. And then May came out, and it just kind of the game just petered out towards the end, and it just got a bit dull again. I don't want us to go into the season where we're just constantly just like going 3 and out, or we're getting stops and then we're not doing anything with it. It just went a little bit flat for me, and I think that's probably my concern from it. But it is a preseason game at the end of the day, and there were positives definitely from the game. Yeah,
absolutely. JD?
I think for me, one of my takeaways is I think likely for me, one of the concerns is down the sideline. Our receivers running go routes. Twice in one game, we had a receiver just shoved out of bounds because they weren't strong enough to fight and keep inside in the go route and win on the release. And I think the likely really, really important part of Van Pelt's offense is the ability to have an X receiver that can just stretch the field and at least drag a safety out of the run game. And I think if Baker and Thornton are likely going to be the two guys who will play that role for us, I think, and potentially Rager fleetingly. But it's likely going to be those two for the most part, and they both just got shoved out of bounds on what could have been real positive plays for May. So that's something I'm quite concerned about and would like to kind of see a little. I know there's a lot of reports that Tyquan's bulked up during this offseason, but the concern was still there for me on those deep balls. So I would like to see a bit more play strength on the outside from our wide receivers on their releases.
Nick, what about you?
I think David Wallace deserves a mention.
Yeah.
A 53-yard kick return this week. Last week against the Panthers, it was a 23-yard punt return. This guy is a walk on. He came to the rookie mini camp as on a tryout. You know, he's an undrafted third division college player. You know, there is that outside chance he could make the 53. I think he's going to make the practice squad regardless. I think he's going to be on the practice squad regardless. There is that outside chance that he could make the 53. Credit where credit's due. We are sitting here slagging Lowe off because he's shit, rightfully. You know, well, let's sit here and give a man some credit when he deserves it. David Wallace has really put his name in the fray and said, you know what? I deserve to be here. And he does. He's played really well. I felt really sorry for J.K. Jackson, who went off with a leg injury. He's had X-rays, MRI. I don't think he was ever going to make the 53, but it sounds like his camp's done. Sounds like
he's on that quickly, Nick. I've just seen online he's been placed on IR and we've claimed a wide receiver on waivers. Yeah.
Cool. So, Matt Landers, never heard of him before. Yeah. So that's just been come up on my phone.
You know, on one of those things that it's sad that he's got injured and what have you. But like I said, I think David Wallace needs some credit. He deserves a mention. He's done really well this training camp, and I kind of hope he does get, even if it's the practice squad. I really kind of hope he gets it because he's done really well. He deserves something.
Kick-off returner, punt returner, can take it for a long way, and he's white. Who does that remind you of?
No comment.
No, there was some really good. My takeaway from this was obviously the pass rush we was waiting for, but there were some other good players in there as well. So Raekwon McMillan and Isaiah Bolden, they all stepped up in their games. McMillan, he made a team high 9 tackles and was noticeable coming downfield. Bolden got the start and showed well in a nickel safety role, closing from his rubber spot for a sack. The only downside for me there was Marcellus Dial. He had a tough night. I mean, he is a 6th round pick. We're not expecting sky high expectations of him. But he was beaten on the 2-point play that won the game for the Eagles and allowed a couple of catches in coverage. So, what the greatest nights for Marcellus Dial. But
I mean, he was targeted 10 times, allowed 8 catches for 106 yards. That's a rough night.
That's a rough night for him.
And missed a tackle.
And he missed
a tackle as well.
Yeah.
So not a good night. He's definitely on the bad list.
Okay, we've got a bit more time before we get on out of it. Preview of the Washington game on Sunday night. Obviously it's the final preseason. It's usually in the old days where it was 4 weeks of preseason. The third week was usually the dress rehearsal. Usually. Well, thank you for a bit of information, Nick. That's interesting. Lost my train of thought now. Yeah. So basically, it's usually the dress rehearsal, but this time it's week 3. We should be seeing a dress rehearsal of what the starting team will look like, both from Patriots, both from Washington, even if it's only for 2 series or something. And then see what happens there. It's Drake Maye's last chance to really show out and really give. We've already said he's already given Drake Maye a headache on selection on who's to start. Can he try and give him a migraine? Because that's going to be the next part in all of this. Can Drake Maye really go above and beyond now in this up and coming game? Because this will be his last chance. And we'll find out sooner or later if Jacoby's going to be the starter or Drake will be the starter. I mean, what does everyone think?
I mean, Mayo said that everyone
revenge game. Sorry, Nick, go on.
It's all right. Mayo said that everyone who's healthy is going to play. So, I expect to see at least 3, if not all 4 QBs. Whether we should see all 4 is a different argument. You've got to think that they've probably decided on 45, if not 50 of the 53 already. So it's really hoping that the guys that have made the roster don't get injured, and don't do anything stupid, don't do anything silly, and just watch your back. Really, it's this third preseason. There's a reason why teams tend to rest their first teamers in this third game, because you don't want to do anything stupid.
Yeah.
But Mayo tends to be, he's doing it his way, and I kind of like that.
Kieran?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, JD. Go on, JD. Go on. Sorry.
No, I didn't say anything. You're all right.
Kieran?
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's been a suggestion, isn't there, about this could be May's final audition to win the job for week 1. So I'd expect him to play a fair chunk of this game. I actually think Jacoby might get a bit longer, because if he is on the ropes potentially for losing the starting job, then they might want him to give him more time to show why he should start week 1. So I might think he might play a bit more, but I still think Drake will play a vast majority of this game before the others come in. And if he lights it up and outplays Jaden Daniels and once again has a really positive performance, then, like you said, Carl, could be going from a headache to a migraine for week 1. I really don't know where it's at the moment. I certainly think the point you made earlier on about, we were talking about when is the week that Drake's going to come in. I certainly think that leash for Jacoby has been shortened. If he is the starter, I don't think he's going to get as many weeks as he perhaps would have had. We were talking about the London game, which is week 8. Miami week 5 could be potentially where it's at the moment. But if Drake plays really well on Sunday night, we could be looking at week 1 starter. So I just want to see more from him, and just to get a bit more clarity about the situation. But equally, I want to, you mentioned earlier, JD, about being disappointed with Javon Baker as well. We've spoke on this podcast about how much we really like him. And it was a real shame, because he did have an off night. Obviously, he had the drop and knocked out of bounds and things like that. But and there's been a suggestion today that he plummeted down the depth chart. I don't buy into that at all. But let's remember that this guy has had 5 weeks or so of really good play in camp, and he's had one off game. Let's not bash him because he's had an off game and say, oh, he's going to turn out to be a bust, when there's much more sample size of him being good than there is bad. So I want to see him turn up on Sunday night. And he's the kind of character I think that will perhaps thrive off that. He even posted a picture on his Instagram of him dropping the ball as motivation. I would not be shocked on Sunday if he has a good game.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that'd be really nice. I'd love to see him bounce back. And I think one of the things about, people say all the time, oh, it's just preseason, it gets overblown. I think it probably gets overblown, because I think you start to see teams as well, like a lot of Buffalo and players like that, just not playing starters because you've had the full week of practice and you've had the joint practice and stuff like that. And I think they're a lot more valuable. And they're probably going to, I think, continue to kind of ascend in their level of value over preseason games. So I think you might get to, one thing, it's not Patriots related, but I don't know if you watched the 49ers and Saints preseason game and watch the 49ers just absolutely hang Brock Purdy out to dry, which was just bizarre, where they rested their entire starting offense apart from Brock Purdy, and let him play behind the second string offensive line with no skill position players. And he's just running for his life and throwing the ball away. It was just wild. So, what coaches are going to use preseason games for, I think it is, with the 3-game structure and stuff, I think is still being worked out. I think for me, the big thing, obviously, and it's been alluded to already, is just no injuries. I just don't want to see anybody go down that's going to potentially contribute this season. I think it'll be interesting to see the evolution of kind of what the plan for the preseason is. It certainly seemed like week 1 was, okay, we know Drake and Jacoby are our number 1 and number 2. We'll use that game to sort out who's number 3. And we saw Milton versus Zappi as kind of the decider for number 3. And that seems to have escalated in terms of Zappi not getting many reps in practice since then. Last weekend was used for kind of let's give Drake and Jacoby a chance to fight out the number 1 spot. And I think Drake made it interesting enough that we might, as Kieran kind of alluded to, have to see this third preseason game as a bit of a decider and dress rehearsal for week 1. So maybe let's throw some more of our scheme out there. Let's see. I think what we've done so far, and as most teams have, apart from Patrick Mahomes, is play quite vanilla football. And so I think you might see a bit more of what you're actually going to see out of the Patriots on Sunday, so we can actually see what and Drake do in a live environment. And I think that might be used. Alternatively, I could be talking bollocks, and they might just play nobody. So I don't know. But I think the way things are going, my prediction would be they would use it to work out who the starter is going to be.
JD, would you be shocked if they go back to that go ball to Javon Baker again? Because he got the separation. He didn't make the catch. I would not be shocked if they dial that up again. And
Please do it again. Do it again.
I think the way he played is not characteristic of what we've seen out of him. Not characteristic of what you saw of him in college. I think Drake Maye seems to have a good connection with him because he looked at him a lot on Thursday night, Friday night, whenever it was. I think I would not be shocked if the first drive that Drake Maye is in, you see a 40, 50-yard ball to Javon Baker, who may take it for a touchdown. I would not be shocked at all. He seems like the kind of absolute type A nut job who would just relish that shit and like you just give him a go ball straight away. And if
he brings that in and takes it to the end zone, our brand new board, our brand new Titantron board, that's going to fall flat on its back because that car's just going to lose their absolute marbles because we haven't seen something like that since when Brady threw to Randy Moss, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, right. What's your predictions for this game? I know it's preseason. We should be making a prediction for this. It's a preseason game, but it is football. It is football, though. So I just hope we have good games. Drake Maye plays well. No one gets injured, and the defense continues to ball out like we know it can. And I think that's really all we can hope for. And also, what I would like is a little caveat. David Wallace to get a punt return touchdown or kickoff return touchdown. He does that. He's in the 53-man roster. Then bang. There's no that would just be unique. So unique. Right. That's the end of our show, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Nick. Thank you to JD. Thank you to Kieran. Thank you to everyone that's been watching. Thank you to everyone that's been listening on Spotify. Make sure you smash the like button on your way out. You hit the subscribe button while at it, or have a Gronk spike the subscribe button. You tell all your friends. Follow us on all our social media platforms. We will be back for another show next week. It won't be a podcast as such. It will just be straight off the YouTube channel because next Tuesday will be the cut down for the 53-man roster. We will be going live at 9 o'clock for everything to come through. And if we have to stay on a little bit late waiting for more cuts to come through, then we will be here and ready. And we'll be blowing the party poppers when Bailey Zappi gets cut. But for now, we're all out of here. Good night. God bless. Go Patriots.
Laters.
Cheers, guys.